Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. We hope you really enjoy the content that we'll listen to today. My name is Erin, and my colleague Eric and I will be your hosts. If you have any questions or comments, needs, help, desires, anything, you can chat with us through the GoToWebinar interface on the right side of your screen. Just use the little chat panel. And also, for any questions that you have during the webinar today, which we wholeheartedly encourage, you can also submit them that way to us as well, and we'll be able to do a little Q&A with our presenter after the end of the presentation. Speaking of our presenter, Mark Hobbins, who is going to give our Redefining the Modern Family talk today, knows a little bit about family. His wife of 32 years and his 7 children would probably agree. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Mark for a while and know a lot about his very large family. Mark is the founder of Family IQ, an online interactive resource center that helps people improve their parenting skills, their relationships, and overall just really strengthen their families. Mark's been asked to weigh in on those topics as an expert for CBS, NBC, People Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. So you get the picture. A lot of pretty impressive world-renowned media outlets go to him for advice on these topics. It's pretty exciting. So we're very happy to have Mark lend his expertise and talk to us today. And without further ado, welcome, Mr. Hobbins.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron. Ladies and gentlemen, what a delight it is for me to participate with all of you today. This is a lot of fun for guys like me to share things that you feel so passionately and deeply about. It's fun to talk about families and about family relationships, and I want to, at the beginning, simply acknowledge all of you for joining today. Whether you see this live or archived, I want you to know that your attendance and participation suggests to me and people like me that you're not only interested in families, but you're probably pretty devoted to your family and want to improve that family and desire to strengthen your family. If you're fortunate enough to have a family, I think this will be very, very valuable to you in terms of how you interact in your relationships. If you're a person who wants to influence other people and their families, I think we're going to suggest some things that you could share with family and friends and others that will be enormously helpful to them. And so I commend all of that to you and hope you find that there's something here that you can action on. You know, as a professional and as a father, I know full well that there are no perfect parents. There's no perfect children either. And we sort of all learn together, don't we? One thing I do know very well is that you're likely doing a lot better than you think you are. And it's true that maintaining a strong family is really challenging, isn't it? But it's also fabulously worth it. So knowing that it's worth it and worth a little bit of your time to learn some things that you can apply to improve and strengthen your family is really the goal of the day and something that I think is just terrific. So today's topic is redefining the modern family, and you know that is profound in terms of the changes that the family has gone through for such a long time. Our goal today is to affirm the fact that families consist of many shapes and sizes. And while the family has undergone various transformations in the last few decades, the fact is that the basic building blocks of happy, effective families really has not changed. Additionally, some of you may find that you're one of the 35 million adults who are facing unknown territory in the form of grandparents and young adult children living arrangements that require a lot of preparation and some management. Some of you probably find yourself experiencing this today. So we're going to take those dynamics and apply some interesting things in our webinar that will remind us and teach us of what we can do to strengthen our family relationships and to prepare more successfully for challenging circumstances that likely we're experiencing or will in the coming weeks and days. You know, there's something called the sandwich generation that I'm not sure many of you are familiar with, but for those of you who may not be familiar with the term sandwich generation, let me just define for you that the sandwich generation is a generation of people who care for their aging parents while supporting their own children. You're sort of stuck in the middle of parents and your own children. Now, this slide clearly has a lot of statistics on it. I hope you can bear with me for just a minute because I think these are some compelling numbers that are important for all of us that will help us at least become more aware of the need that we have to prepare for a unique challenge coming down the road. According to the Pew Research Center, just over 1 out of every 8 Americans aged 40 to 60 are both raising a child and caring for a parent. I think that's a lot. In addition, there's between 7 and 10 million adults caring for their aging parents from a long distance. And then let me share this. According to some recent information from the U.S. Census Bureau, over 22.5 million adults between the ages of 18 and 34 were actually living at home with their parents in 2012. Now, what this means is that 1 out of every 3 people between 18 and 34 are living with their parents. Now, for those of us who are my age, that just wasn't sort of an option, back in the day. But it is becoming much more of an option today and something that we need to prepare for. Recognize that this is a growing trend. In fact, it's up 27% from a decade ago. Something that we need to be aware of, plan for properly. These numbers to me make it clear that today's families do indeed face unique and challenging circumstances. These, what I call sort of stressors, coupled with the changing landscape of the family, can be overwhelming and often difficult to manage. While today's modern family, ladies and gentlemen, faces such challenge, it's important to realize that the core issues and skills of what makes a family work are still relevant today, maybe even more important than ever. Let me hasten to add that no matter what the size or shape of your family, I promise you that you can have more of what you desire. I stand as sort of a one-man recruiting station to invite you and to enlist you in your best efforts in the great tasks of strengthening your family. Now, today's presentation is going to focus on really 4 main topics. I want to share some ideas about how we can strengthen our relationships with our partners. I want to talk about utilizing some tips and tools I'm going to weave through the presentation to help unify family members, and let's talk a little bit about how we can use technology to do so. I want to share a few thoughts about how you can influence your children in a positive direction. And then I want to sort of end with defining and passing along your legacy as a parent and grandparent. Sound interesting? Well, at the very beginning, why don't we talk for just a second about and ask you to grab a pencil and paper or something to write with and write on. I want you to do as our slide suggests. I want you to think of the 3 or 4 or 5 things that you think are important elements or attributes of an effective family. Take a second. This will make it much more meaningful to you and me as we sort of interact here through this webinar. Write down a couple of things that you think are sort of foundational stones, critical things, core things for a family. These are things you have experienced yourself. These are things you've seen in other families. What would you say? Well, it's not probably unlikely that you suggested some of the things that you see on the. First, let's talk about unconditional love and acceptance. I want you to know it's difficult sometimes to separate behavior from the person, but it's absolutely necessary in families. It's important that we recognize and honor the individual while clearly seeing their behavior as something that doesn't define them, because none of us can or should be defined by our mistakes and our weaknesses. We're always defined by what we can be and defined by what our potential can be. I think it's important that every family, in terms of having love and acceptance, has a certain vibe that says, you're always welcome here. I think that's an important thing to know. You're always accepted and validated here. You're never criticized here. This is the one safe place in a crazy world that you can come home and be loved and accepted. Undoubtedly, someone wrote down on their list communication. Frequent, honest, and open dialogue is so important in an effective family. It's kind of interesting because if you're anything like me or the people that I hang with, you go to work and you're sort of involved and you're sort of on your A game, at least you're trying to be, and then you come home and you're sort of not on your A game anymore, and you crawl into your own space and your own world, and you forget, you were a good conversationalist at work or in other environments with your friends, but you come home and you sort of lose the ability to be a good conversationalist. It's a challenge in American families to make sure that when you come home and you are home, that you're a good conversationalist with your family members. We're going to talk a lot about this later, but let me just identify right now in terms of communication that nonverbal communication is more powerful than words. What you say is not nearly as valuable as what you do. In that light, let me ask you, what would you say are the two most annoying nonverbal communications that really sort of frost you, that sort of put you on edge, right? That you just do not like. What would you say those two things would be? Again, ways that people behave rather than what they say. Can I name a couple that I've heard over and over again? This idea of the silent treatment, you just sort of put the barriers around, you just don't communicate, you sort of roll over in bed, I'll give you the back kind of a thing, you just sort of play that non-engaging silent treatment thing. I'm going to show you, I'm going to make you pay. Such a common thing. How about rolling the eyes? Sort of those facial expressions that really just tell you the person's just really, egging you on. Well, again, what you say is not nearly as important as what you do. Now, the challenge about saying in terms of communication, I think it's important to recognize that sometimes we do say some pretty difficult things, like criticism. Can I tell you in 25 years of my professional career that criticism never works? It hasn't worked in my family. I can't criticize a spouse, a partner, a child, a family member to be better. You just never criticize a person to be better. I mean, they don't get there in what I'm saying. You can criticize them. It doesn't move them in the direction that you want. Criticism never moves a person in the direction that you want. You don't like it, and neither does the family member that you're criticizing. Communication actually becomes much more easy and much more powerful when we come from a place of deep interest and well-being in the other person. Unity. Being united in a common purpose enables those involved to achieve more than they ever thought they could on their own. And every home needs to feel united. Have you ever been part of a team or a group that accomplished something more than you thought you could, something cool, and maybe you won something, you achieved some great success? The power of the group, be it 2 or 10, can raise the level of not only achievement, but of closeness and unity. There's a certain vibe, a certain feeling that comes when a team is working together. The same is true with your family. Having common goals, common agreed upon processes when you talk about things like discipline or how we spend money. These things not only protect you from unwanted stress and opposition, but it actually preserves the core, or what I call sort of the goose that lays the golden egg, which in fact is your family relationships. There's nothing more important than your family relationships. So when we talk about communication, do not put at risk your relationships because you're not taking the time to define your common goals and common processes, particularly as we discuss the ideas of unity. Now, we could discuss a lot more things because I'm sure several of you wrote down things like respect or responsibility. Maybe someone said safety or a sense of appreciation for each other. We'll have to save those for another day because there are so many things we could say. Suffice to say that the basics have never changed. Let's start off discussing for just a minute the idea of your relationship with your partner. I want you to write on a piece of paper the 2 or 3 things that attracted you most about your partner. When you first started sort of dating or hanging out or you became interested in them, what were those 2 or 3 things? Again, go back. You may you may have to go back a little bit. You probably have some things you admire about them today, don't you? What are those things? Put them on a piece of paper. It's been my experience, ladies and gentlemen, that after the newness of the relationship is worn off, like so many things in life, we tend as humans to then focus more easily on the weaknesses, the frailties of another. The person we held in such high esteem, the person we love being with, somehow the shine, is now more dull. Simply because we're closer to them, we see their weaknesses and things like that. That can be really damaging to a relationship. Let me share with you the story of a woman by the name of Lola Walters, and she entitled her little story, The Grapefruit Syndrome. She said, as a young wife, I learned that marriage could be sweeter if I didn't focus on my husband's faults. My husband and I had been married for about 2 years when I read an article recommending that married couples discuss truthfully and candidly the habits or mannerisms they found annoying in each other. This theory was that if partners knew about such annoyances, they could correct them before they become sort of more deeper and resentful about them. Well, she said it made sense to me. I talked with my husband about the idea. After some hesitation, he agreed to give it a try. She said, as I recall, we were to name 5 things that we found annoying, and I started it off. After more than 50 years, I can remember only my first complaint: grapefruit. I told him that I didn't like the way he ate grapefruit. Instead of cutting it open and eating it with a spoon, he peeled it and ate it a section at a time. Nobody else I knew ate grapefruit like that. Could I be expected to spend a lifetime watching my husband eat grapefruit like that? Although I have forgotten them, I'm sure my other complaints, she said, were of similar importance. Then it was his turn. And it has been more than a half a century, but I still carry the mental image of my husband's thoughtful, puzzled expression. He simply looked at me and said, I can't think of anything I don't like about you. Gasp. I quickly turned my back, not knowing how to explain my tears. I found fault with him over such trivial things, while he hadn't even noticed any of my peculiar and no doubt annoying habits. I wish I could say this experience completely cured me of fault finding. It didn't, but it did teach me early in my marriage that we need to keep in perspective and usually ignore the small differences in our spouses or partners' habits and personalities. When I hear of married couples being incompatible, I always wonder if they're suffering from what I now call the grapefruit syndrome. Okay, so tip number 1: keep in a place where you can view often the characteristics that you like about your partner. I'm inviting you to put it in a place where you can see it, where you can think of it often. Put it in your car, in your purse, in your wallet. If you do not do this, I think you're going to create for yourself potentially a self-fulfilling prophecy wherein you sort of focus on the negative things about your spouse or partner, which is not going to do anything for you other than keep you fixated on the things that you don't like. I'm not naive enough to believe that your partner doesn't have deficiencies. I just want you to know that if you focus on the partner's weaknesses and frailties, you'll eventually notice that they're going to overtake your entire landscape of your own view. And you don't want that to happen, because there's something wonderful and beautiful about the people that you love and care for that sometimes you may not see. The second tip: a popular and effective way for partners and couples to improve their relationship is to be aware of each other's love language. This is a term that many of you are likely familiar with. Some of you may not be. So let me communicate this idea of love language to you. Now, the love language has nothing to do with intimacy, except it perhaps talks a lot about emotional intimacy. Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a popular book called The 5 Languages of Love several years ago that helps one identify the love language your partner responds to most. These sort of 5 love languages are broken down into the following categories. We express our love in words of affirmation. This is my way, by the way. Some people express their love in the use of quality time. Some people express love through gifts. Others value love through acts of service. And others still value love through physical touch. These are the 5 languages of love. And I think you'll find them being something applicable, meaningful to you, easy to understand and grasp. But let me try to say it in another way. I give a talk about languages of love and about this idea of currency because I think there's also relationship currency. What I mean to say is that if you were traveling around the world and you were wanting to buy something, you'd have to use the currency that they value to acquire something. Even though we all call it money, different countries, in fact, different people, value the exchange much differently. It may be money, but the value is perceived completely differently. If you want to purchase something from me, you'll have to use the currency that I value. When we talk about relationships, all of us have a currency, and there's an exchange rate associated with relationships. In other words, you may value touch, but I may value time. You may value gifts, and another may value words of praise, appreciation, and affirmation. To learn more about this on your screen, you can simply go to www.5lovelanguages.com and read more about this and take a test. There's one for yourself to identify your love language, the same test you use for your spouse or partner, and there's one used for children up to, I think, age 10. It's really valuable. I literally know thousands of people who have had their relationships improve by this very simple yet profound idea of how we value and communicate love. It is profound. Well, next, in terms of the idea of relationship with your partner, I'm asking and inviting you to be a really good listener. Now, the term really good listener isn't as formal as the term active listening, which is what I want to define for you. Because listening is really more of an art form. It's really a way of suggesting that listening is not as passive as many of us sort of practice and apply, but rather active listening suggests obviously much more of an active or participatory and involved experience. Like all other topics being discussed today, this could be its own webinar, but let's sort of cover some big rocks, right? Some high points, and see if we can't practice some active listening skills together. Karen Osterman, a researcher on listening skills, reminds us of a very important truth, and that is when you listen carefully to another person, you give that person what she calls psychological air, some room to breathe, as it were. Once that vital need is met, you can then focus on influencing and problem solving. I love this idea. Think of it, ladies and gentlemen. Listening well actually provides the ability to solve problems. Sometimes you and I go straight to the fix. We want to fix the problem and without the process. Sometimes the process is more important than the result. Another way of saying this idea of active listening might be seek first to understand before seeking to be understood. I believe that listening is great medicine to the soul of the other person as well as your own. Now, in my teaching, I found it that it's helpful to look at sort of both sides of the coin, as it were. We sort of teach the correct principles, if you will, and then at the same time we ought to look at its opposite, maybe the ineffective way of teaching the same thing. So in that light, let me ask you something that you likely we've all experienced together. So get your pen or paper, and let's have you identify something that I think would be helpful. On your paper, could you write down, let's say, 3 things. Let's choose 3 things that you think are common errors that we make in our listening. What are some common problems of listening that you think we might experience? These are things likely you've experienced. I'm sure you've had these conversations throughout your life of what works and what doesn't work. So your 3 things, let me share with you what I think some of you may have written. I think you may have written down one of the common errors that we make is not focusing on the person that we're speaking with. We seem to get so distracted, don't we? Sometimes we're in a hurry. Being in a hurry is a common communication mistake, a common listening mistake. How about interrupting a person before their sentence is completed? That happens all the time. Come on, seriously. Or how about have you participated in the conversation when the other person just cannot wait until it's their turn to talk? You're just not sure they grabbed anything that you had said? Surely you've had to have that one. Something a little bit more challenging is sometimes when you want to talk to someone, and one of the common errors I think you would have likely written is giving unwarranted or unrequested advice or direction. Sometimes people just want to talk. They want to sort of cathartic, if you will, just sort of open it up and just share and just be present with sharing without anyone trying to give direction. This is particularly true when it comes to your children. Sometimes people just want to talk, and being able to honor that is so important. But it's a common mistake we all make. Another common one is to say, I know exactly how you feel. Oh boy. And then they follow up with sort of telling me their story, right? No, I'm not really interested in your story. I'm interested in my story. I want you to listen to me. I mean, surely some of you have to be smiling at this because we've all experienced people like this. And we end up falling into the same trap ourselves. We don't want to do that. So review your list and make sure that you don't practice those today, but let's do some things that do work. Let's go back to this idea of active listening. I want to underscore again the fact that what you see is far more important than what you hear in terms of words. I'm sure you're aware of the absolute fact that tone and body language are far more important than words. In fact, studies show us that what we observe has far more impact upon us, as well as our ability to retain information, than does words. So consider how we sort of absorb information, how we sort of grab in our brain the things that we're actually experiencing. 1% is taste, 1.5% is touch, 3.5% is smell, 11 is hearing, but 83% is sight, what we see. In our communication, it becomes so vital if you want to be a good communicator and a good listener to adjust your body language, be present with someone, affect your tone, look someone in the eye. We'll talk about many of these things in just a moment. There's so many things that we can do because why? What people see is more important often than what they hear. So let's talk about these 3 things you can do to become a better listener, what I call an active listener. 1, again, be totally present, physically and emotionally. That means we have eye-to-eye contact. That's a skill that we seem to be missing more and more. Learn to look people straight in the eye and be present with them. It's a window to the soul and a validation that you're concerned and interested in that person. I invite you to remove the distractions, including phones. Nothing's worse than talking to someone while they're answering a text or trying to mute their phone for something. Get rid of the phone, put it down, turn it off, do something, but remove the distractions. Remove yourself from noisy environments. Remove yourself from time distractions, time restraints, where you only have a minute. If you, by the way, if you only have a minute, you could just honor the person by saying, "What you're saying to me is so important. I want to make sure I give my full attention. Would you mind if we, you know, circle back at this at 2 o'clock because I have something that's pressing on me now, and I got to get rid of that so I can, totally invest my time in this because your relationship and what you're saying is really important to me." Something along those lines. Watch your time restraints. I want to suggest as well that when you listen, I want you to learn to become an advocate. I want you to listen in such a way that you're going to repeat what the other person is saying. This keeps you focused on what they're saying and making sure that you sort of learn to advocate their position, what they're saying to you, what the words they're using. Can you use the same words? The second idea about this is in learning to become their advocate, I want you to, and I'm inviting you to listen as if you had to repeat both the words, but now I want you to repeat the emotion involved. Can you identify with the emotion that they're communicating? This is very important, powerful sort of communication tips. They seem so simple to us, but they have such profound impact. The next thing in terms of what you can do to be a better active listener is to practice the idea of repeating and clarifying what the person is saying. Would you please ensure that what you heard the person say, you're going to repeat back and ask for clarification at times. This will allow you to confirm not only what you've heard, but lets the other person know that you are actually paying attention to them. When you are not sure of what you've heard, you can simply say, let me see if I heard you correctly. Or is this what you're saying? Or did you mean to say, and then you repeat back what you thought you heard them say. That those reflection, restatements, repeating back is so powerful in communication. People will notice a marked difference in the way that you listen. I promise you, it will work, and I invite you to practice it now. Let's take a little bit of a transition now from partners, and let's talk about influencing our children for just a few minutes. As you're reading this slide on your slide deck, I think it's important to ask you to read this, and as you do so, would you mind writing down, taking a guess of when you think this was actually written? I've used this again all over the world in various talks I've given and things like that, and I find it sort of funny and sort of amusing in a way. This actually, well, most people would say it was written maybe 50 years ago or 100 years ago or maybe the last several hundred years. Actually, it was written by Socrates in the 5th century. The point is that, ladies and gentlemen, if you are fortunate enough to have children, be a caregiver of children, I want you to know that the frustrations of raising children has been, is, and always will be at least challenging and not frustrating. But you need to remember that there are some things you can do to influence your children in a positive, sort of pro-social way, a way that really helps them become successful and effective in their life and their interpersonal skills and what they can accomplish in their life. And we as parents have that power and capability, though we often minimize it. In terms of influencing your children, I want to discuss three unique things. One we call the therapeutic alliance, which is an interesting term for many of you. One is the subject of appropriate praise, and the last is parenting style. You see, I'm a big believer that parents are unaware of the enormous influence they can have on their children. Now, again, some of you may not feel that way, but I promise you, I do not care what your children say to you most of the time in terms of yelling at you, screaming at you, telling you you're ruining their life, they're flipping you off, slamming the door. Listen, that's just the way kids express frustration. Do not get caught up in that. I can give you an entire talk about this. I can tell you fundamentally, 95% of the time, it is not true. It's just the only way they have to communicate. So I'm going to push all that to the side. You have a clean slate because you've now heard this. We've watched your slate clean. And now let's dig into three cool things that you can do to improve their relationship with your children and influence them in a really powerful way. Okay? Number one, I've spent 25 plus years in the therapeutic industry, if you will. And what I've learned is something that I think has powerful application to parenting. And so I would ask you, what can we parents learn from the therapist? And there's a lot of things, actually. But those are things that we can apply and do. So let me just tell you about this idea of a therapeutic alliance. It's really a fancy way of expressing something that they found in research. And anytime you do research, you're using some terms that are not sort of typically commonplace to all of us, right? Well, you can see on the screen that therapists are taught and trained to a variety of therapeutic modalities, as you see, whether it's psychoanalysis or Gestalt, cognitive behavioral therapy. The list goes on and on. There's literally dozens of them. And so researchers wanted to know what was the most effective in all the therapeutic sort of interactions. What sort of modality yields the greatest impact and growth in a positive way? Well, they did multiple research for the last several decades, and you know something? They keep finding the same thing over and over again. What's the result? What is the best therapeutic modality to use? Ironically, none of them. What research has suggested and has proven over and over again is that in a therapeutic relationship, it's more about how the client feels about the therapist. How does this apply to you? Because it's what your children think about you that's more important than any one thing you may do. You see, that relationship between you and your kids has the greatest impact on their development and growth and progress. Now, clearly, you have to recognize that kids are kids, and they're going to do, this pendulum is going to swing from one end to the other in terms of how well their behavior is. Don't get so focused on that. Just know that if you want to be a parent of influence, it's all about your relationships. We've proven this over and over again in various environments. If you ever heard the term therapeutic alliance again, you'll simply know it's a fancy term for saying it's all about the quality of the relationship. So, as a parent, you can nurture a strong relationship with your children, a strong alliance. Consider doing some very simple things. Remember to be a friendly and a warm person. Again, if you're anything like me or some of the people that I hang with, you come home from work and you're just exhausted emotionally and physically. It's important to remember to be a friendly and warm person. Smile when you see your children. Offer them a sincere compliment. Give them a hug or some other comfortable physical expression of your love for them. It's so valuable to them. Learning to listen without judging or offering this unwarranted advice we spoke of earlier is also an important thing to do with kids. Practice your active listening skills. Seek to deeply or sincerely understand the information your child is sharing with you. Learn to ask for further information. That idea of clarification or restatement is so valuable to kids. They just want to talk. Discuss and converse things that are interesting and meaningful to your kids. I've been asked 1,000 times at least, what can I do to improve my relationship with my child? When we're talking about relationships, I just want you to know, be as involved in the things that your kids like as you can. Learn to enjoy the things that they enjoy. It's okay to ask about school, but maybe you can be a little bit more creative in your questions. It's sort of boring to talk to some of us parents, right? Because we say the same dumb thing all the time. Maybe we could say something different. Hey, what was the hardest thing you dealt with today? Who was the friend you had the most fun with today? You accomplished the same thing, but you got to learn to ask the questions in a little bit more creative, different way. None of us like the same routine over and over again, do we? You might bring up some current events in their life and ask their opinion about something that requires an expression of their beliefs or values is also an important thing that you can do. Creating a strong relationship with your children is often easier said than done. But I like to take this sort of the baseball look at it since this is baseball season. You know, Major League ball players get paid millions of dollars for batting 300 as an average. That means they only get a hit basically one out of every 3 times. So as a parent, become a baseball player. Give yourself a little bit of space and and um, and some relaxation, some slack. Cut yourself some slack. You may only connect 1 out of 3 times, but you're probably a pretty great parent if you do. In our efforts to raise children, take a minute today to nurture your relationship. After all, I believe it's the most important thing that you can do. Next, this is an interesting discussion about praise, because praise, even though 85% of Americans think it's important to tell their kids that they're smart, actually there's a growing body of research that tells us a different story. It simply is this. A woman by the name of Dr. Carol Dweck, who's currently at Stanford University, conducted some research about 12, 15 years ago from when she was as a professor at Columbia University. She studied 400 fifth graders in the New York City schools, and her seminal work has been validated over and over again. She continues to do this, and it has some pretty profound impacts on how you and I as parents praise our children. Let me just synthesize this for you in 30 seconds. They did a number of interactions with kids in the tests that they took. What they found is that the kids who were praised at the end of taking a test were praised for one line of praise. One was, you were really smart at this, or you seem to be smart at this. It was a praise line of their result. You must be smart at this. They were praised for their brains. The other line of praise given to this rotated between different kids was, you were praised for your effort. Well, we thought, Dr. Dweck says, we thought that the impact would be significant. We were surprised to see the huge chasm, the significance of the impact. For those who were praised for their effort, 90% of the kids chose a harder set of tests or puzzles in that second go round. Those who were praised for their intelligence, right, the result, actually chose an easier test. What she found was that there was a 50-point spread between kids who were praised for their efforts, achieving more, than kids who were praised for their brains or their result, always wanting to choose less. What we found in the academic world is that when kids are praised for their brains, they tend to cheat, they tend to take control, they tend to do whatever it takes to get the result. They rarely have the ability to manage things what they perceive as outside of their control. When you praise a child for the result, they tend to see themselves as successful only as it relates to what they can achieve in their life, as opposed to managing and controlling a journey in their life. Emphasizing, ladies and gentlemen, things like natural intelligence takes it out of the child's control, because you can control your environment if you know you can control the amount of homework you do, the amount of studying you do, the amount of listening you give. It provides a wonderful recipe for success, while praising the result provides simply a recipe for failure. This has been proven over and over and over again. If you want to praise your children for the result, you will tend to set your kids up for failure. If you do so, you'll find that your kids will be motivated to cram, to cheat, to feel tremendous shame when the result is not achieved. Research has shown that when parents praise the effort or the underlying activity that produces results, kids will likely achieve more, they'll achieve higher grades, and they'll achieve greater emotional stability and self-esteem. Their ego state is strengthened. This is really important for us to recognize. So next time your child comes home with a report card or a progress report or anything on a test or a quiz, rather than say, well, that's a great grade. And while it is, you may want to say, how hard was it to get that grade? How much did you have to work to do that? How do you feel about the amount of effort you gave in order to achieve that? How does it feel to know that you can work hard for something that you want? It's a great life lesson that we can control those kinds of things. The best reward, ladies and gentlemen, is your ability to shape your child into a self-sustaining, self-motivated person with a high sense of self-worth. That is what we're all trying to do, isn't it? So learn to praise more effectively. The third idea is this idea of parenting style. Several decades ago, Dr. Diana Baumrind conducted a series of research analysis on parents and the impact of what she calls parenting style. I don't know if you knew this or not, ladies and gentlemen, but each of us have a personality style, we have a communication style, we have all kinds of styles, and we have a parenting style as well. Her research has been validated a number of times in recent studies in the last 5 or 8 years that suggest that a parent's parenting style has enormous impact on the well-being and the pro-social behavior of their child. Dr. Baumrind suggests that your parenting style is really a combination of two primary elements that she calls warmth, this sort of intimacy, this sort of relationship you have with your child, and the sense of control, or what we might call order or structure today. We probably don't use the word control. It's not as politically correct, right? But it's you get the idea, right? Warmth or control. Expectations and structure and order are also applied to warmth and love and feelings of intimacy, etc. Well, this idea is profound in its impact. Let me just share with you a couple things about a parenting style. Dr. Brahman suggested there are actually 4 parenting styles. One that we call the permissive style. It's really a parent with high warmth. They're all about love, but they have no order, no structure, no expectations in their home. They're low on the control style, the control scale. Second is the authoritative parent. This is a parent who actually is high on the warmth scale and also high on the control or structure or order scales. The expectations are high. There's the uninvolved parent. This is a parent who is low on warmth and low, very low on control. The authoritarian parent, wow, this is a parent who's high on the control, right? Lots of structure, lots of order, kind of the general, if you will, right? High on control and low on warmth. Well, these are the 4 styles, and probably like me, most of us are probably a combination of those two, but we really have a dominant style. Now, let me give you just one bit of research. Dr. Craig Hart is the chair of the Marriage and Family and Human Development Program in the School of Family Life at a major university. In fact, this university is probably renowned for this study on parenting styles. And he states that research has shown that parenting style affects children's social development in so many different ways. He said this, quoting him, "Over the past 20 years, I've collaborated in studies of parents in several parts of the United States and in Australia, China, and Russia, where we found surprising similarity in parenting styles and their effects on children's social skills. Around the world, parental behavior can be classified," and he called them a little bit differently than Dr. Baumrind, but they all were the same thing, just use a different term, right? In other words, the authoritarian parent he called coercive, right? The permissive parent, he also used the word permissive. He also used the word authoritative. He says this, "Our research suggests that the authoritative styles are most effective in the long-term development of positive social behavior in children." Now, I'm dumbing down an entire body of research for you to make this applicable, simple for us to grasp. As a parent, can I invite you to really take a hard look on this idea of parenting styles, okay? Now, let's as we're coming to the end of our presentation, I want to talk to you about these last 3 items about your legacy as a parent or a grandparent. We want to talk about your social media, the idea of a family brand, and something that I call the ethical will. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important for you to be involved in the social media. I look at a lot of research about a lot of things when it comes to social media. It has a lot of very positive benefits, as several negative things, but can I tell you, as a parent and grandparent, you definitely want to be the cool parent or grandparent and get involved with your children or your grandchildren in social media. It certainly allows you to connect more often, if nothing else. Please don't excuse away the fact that it's maybe a surface level. It's so short, it's not deep, it's not in front of them face to face. That's true, but you got to meet people where they're at, and then you can sort of get to that deeper thing. Social media now may be the key, the door to get in a little deeper. and you want as a parent to be involved with your kids. So I'm asking you to do this. Text a loved one right now. If your cell phone's next to you, bring out your phone, text somebody it's someone in your family that you care and love about. Just tell them that you love them and thinking about you today. Just something really quick. You may not feel this as personal, but believe me, you cannot do this enough. I don't want you to spend all your time at work doing this, obviously, but I do want to say that it's important that you learn to be a good texter. Also, if you are fortunate enough to be in a family, then I'm going to suggest that you have group texts. Now, that may be an additional cost to you, so you may not want to do it. But for those of you who can, our family has a family group text every day. It seems someone starts a group text. We're talking about something, some picture, some experience that people are talking about, some current event, and we're chatting back and forth. Right? It just seems that it's a fun thing to do, and I want to encourage you to consider the same thing. Be a good texter. If you're not on Facebook, I'd really suggest you get on Facebook because your kids and grandkids are probably on Facebook and you want to be where they're at for a variety of reasons, believe me, but particularly about the relationship building. It's fun to do that. Lastly, you may have heard something called Instagram. Many of you are probably very familiar with it. You probably are actively involved. Can I just say to you that you want to be involved in Instagram? Take photos, share them. It's a fun thing. It's just a hoot, and it's a great thing for you to stay connected. Let's talk about the idea of a family brand. All of you are probably familiar with the idea that corporations actually spend billions of dollars each year on promoting their brand for the precise reason that brand identification, both in terms of sort of their logo and the values that stand behind that logo, influences customer behavior. Think of things like Nike or Apple or the host of other companies we have on the slide here. They believe that the millions of dollars that they spend to advertise their brand and logo will in fact impact us to purchase their product. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I implore you, believe me, if it did not work, if this advertising of their brand and logo did not work, if it did not influence our behavior, they wouldn't do it any longer. But we tend to think of brands only in the world of business. And I'm suggesting to you that we are missing the unifying power and influence that a brand can have and bring to a family. In the same way that a company brand influences customers' purchasing behavior and their loyalty, a family brand has the same impact. It inspires positive behavior and loyalty. There is a unifying power in creating and living your family brand and logo. Individuals and families, no matter what your size, can benefit from a core set of values or principles that are created, defined, agreed to, and then symbolized. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with things like totems and shields and crests that have been used in virtually all cultures throughout the world. No matter, it's seriously, and all cultures have utilized some form of this idea of a brand to symbolize what families or tribes or nations stand for. Creating your own current living, breathing brand focuses individuals and unites families around a rallying point that improves behavior and instills deeper family pride. At Family IQ, again, we call this idea the family brand. How do you go about doing something like this? Well, first, sit down as a family, identify your values. Now, you're likely going to list a long list of values that you think are important, but you got to whittle them down to, something much more work, 3, 4, 5, something like that, a limited number of values. Identify with those values, a symbol that represents them. In our family, one of our values is fun. And to represent fun in our family, we have a picture of a ski boat because we've gone skiing as a family since the kids were the first child was born. We love water skiing in our family, for instance. That represents fun to us. You probably want to take those values and put them in some and create what we call around that a family motto. And you see on the slide here, you see some traditional sort of European sort of crests or shields that has a family value motto up on the top. You might see no more empty chairs. That's our motto actually as a family. And then you place these in some sort of a crest or a logo format. It doesn't matter how you do it. It just means you want to do it. It has such a profound influence. Now, while you can do this at home, it's free of charge. You do it yourself, but if you want a little help, you can go to a website called makeyourcoatofarms.com. It's actually our website. It's free of charge. You're not going to have to do anything. Just go through the process. We have tens of thousands of people who do this every month, actually. It gives you the tools to walk through this process. It's a lot of fun. It's just an enormous lot of fun, and I commend it to you wholeheartedly. I feel strongly that this little simple idea will unite your family, focus your values, and improve your collective behavior. Now, lastly, there's something that we call this idea of the ethical will that I think is so powerful in addition to the family brand that we've just talked about. Now, this is along the same kind of line, but it's something more personal about you, and let me just suggest it this way. In the 18th and 19th centuries, in the Industrial Revolution came about, and which actually took people away from the agrarian society that we were living in on the farm, in the fields, and brought them to work outside of the farm in the fields, and brought them into work in factories and things like that. This had enormous social consequences, not only in terms of the technology and being able to produce more products and goods and services, but actually had an enormous social impact in terms of its impact on the family. If you're anything like me, I doubt that most of your kids, of our kids, actually know what we do for work, and probably don't even care. That's not the point. What is the point is that we took for granted in an agrarian culture where we worked in the fields and the farms and maybe had our own family store, when we worked together before we were brought out of into the factory, that we talked about values, principles, concepts, ideas, morals. It was just a natural part of our workday. They come up naturally. Today, because you and I leave, we don't have a field or a farm, most of us, and we go to work. And so the concepts and principles and values that we once talked about now seem so unnatural for us. It's hard to even talk about those today, to come up with a reason to talk about them. You have to be more creative in order to do so. Again, I'm going to suggest that you want to pass along to your children the legacy of your life. The verbal legacy that you can share with your kids can be codified, written down, where they can know what you stood for. The things that have made you you are unique and fabulous and wonderful, and your kids want to hear them. So, to give you an idea, some years ago, I went to the local store, bought 8 pieces of parchment paper, and printed on it my ethical will. I just want to share it with you as a way of maybe giving you an idea to do your own. I wrote, I, Mark Hobbins, do hereby bequeath my beliefs, experience, and knowledge to my family. I do this in the hopes that no descendant of mine will ever wonder what I strove to stand for. I acknowledge before all that I have made many mistakes and was less than my best too much of the time. I have sought to teach my children what I know, what I have felt, and what I have seen. I hope they will forgive me for my feeble attempts and at times my overzealousness to have them learn what I know. And then I wrote down, actually, I think 17 or 19, these one-liners. My greatest achievement was marrying your mother, Diane. My greatest joy is being together. Wherever my family is, it is heaven to me. Attitude is a constant companion and empowers those who master it. Being thankful is a hallmark of greatness. In humility, we find our greatest strength. Your family is your greatest work and reward. Well, the list goes on and on. Time doesn't allow us to go through all of them. You're probably not interested in all of them, but you can do this yourself. You can do some great things and leave for your children and grandchildren an ethical will, a document that says, this is what I've learned in my life. I promise you they will talk about it for the rest of your life. Ladies and gentlemen, in review, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've tried to give you some ideas, some practical suggestions, maybe unique for some, new to others, common for many of you. But let's act on them today. Let's do one thing today from the time that we've invested to act on one thing. And if you do, your time will have been worth it today. Thank you very much, Aaron. Eric, I turn the talking stick, as it were, back to you.
Well, great. Well, we're coming to the end of our presentation. We have time just for a few quick questions. And Mark, we'll start with this one. My wife and I have a blended family that's come together from 2 previous marriages. Do you have any recommendations for what we should consider for creating positive experiences with our children?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do, and certainly there are some challenges to overcome. But I think I think children and families are pretty much the same wherever we go. They all want the same kinds of things. It's learning to sort of live and meld personalities. So I think it's important to if you want to provide some meaningful experiences, I think it's first to apply some of the principles of communication we have here today that we've discussed. I would encourage you to practice those active listening skills within the family. I certainly believe that a blended family, maybe more than ever, this is a new day. This is a new chapter of your life, and let's make the best of it. So let's get together and develop our own unique family brand today. We're bringing in two households and two sets of ideas and ways of operating, and let's try to meld them into one. I think is so important. Blended families, carry with them a little hurt, a little pain, and being validated and having something to stand for becomes so helpful to them because you want to move on from the past and the hurt and the grief and the loss that some may have felt. So I would commend, as a blended family, practice those communication skills, get the idea of developing a family brand together, so very powerfully important. Help each other learn the languages of love, how each other communicates love. It's so important that people are validated on their terms rather than your terms. I'd commend those three things to you most warmly.
All right, Mark, here's another question. I realize that my family is very busy and we're all trying to keep up with our lives, but should I push for us to spend more time together?
Well, I think spending more time together is the optimal thing. I think the thing you want to really focus on is, can are you doing the very best you can in the time that you have? There's no, I'm not going to talk around, time. The amount of time is important, but now you have to do the best job you can with children today and all the scholastic requirements that they have both academically and in other extracurricular activities. It makes it very challenging for people. When you are together, ask yourself, am I doing the best I can? It's really about maximizing the rare opportunities you may have as a parent in connecting throughout the day with your children. I would just reinforce it again. In the time that you have available, whether you press for it or not, I think it's important you do press for dinner. There's a lot of research about having dinner together. I think you do press for some times that you want and need to be together, and the times you are together, whatever those are, being scheduled, manufactured, or just sort of experienced in the moment. Make sure you're making the very most of it by doing some of the things that we have and communicating the way that we've suggested. There's a whole host of things that you can do in terms of creating some traditions that I think are very important, both for the blended family question we had earlier, as well as pressing time together. It's important, I think, that you get together as a family when you celebrate certain holidays, certain birthdays. If you're like our family, we make, people get their own meal, mom makes their own favorite dinner, yada yada yada, right? But we do something that we think is really great. I'll just commend this to you in 30 seconds. When you do get together, make sure that you're making the most of it, that you are putting some extra effort into the ordinary things of life. When we have a birthday celebration, the 9 of us get together, or now 15 of us get together because of married children and grandchildren, that we take time to do what we call a strength group. We just simply say one thing we like or admire or love about the person. Can I commend that to you? When you are together, do something unique, do something creative, do something a little different. And when you celebrate a birthday, take a minute to go around the room and just say one thing that we like or admire about you. I promise you it will change your birthday.
Well, thanks so much, Mark. That sounds like a perfect and lovely end to a great webinar. We appreciate all of your expertise and insightfulness so much. And those were great questions. We really appreciate everyone's attendance, and we hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.